Yes, we have two similar questions that came in. You can read them here. The first one is a little bit longer, but I think it really lays the framework and the thinking. So I will read the second question here in interest of time. We have a couple of people on our executive team who believe strategic planning is a waste of their time. What can I do to convince them otherwise?
And you can see the first question that's up there, again, as Ryan mentioned, is fairly similar to the second one, which is where the CEO is the individual who feels like that strategic planning is a waste of their time. So, this continues to be a question that comes to this forum, which is how do we convince leaders about the value and the benefits of strategic planning? So you saw in our statistics that a lot of the organizations, and the organizations that certainly responded to the Bain study, which are highly successful organizations, and it's a global study, actually hugely value strategic planning. So that doesn't necessarily mean, however, and certainly hasn't come to this forum, that your executives or yourself, if you're one of them, value strategic planning. And I think the reason for that, of course, is all of us have been part of wasted efforts, offsites that were really, really good that didn't generate results, strategic plans that are fabulous and beautiful but aren't actually used, and that seems to be, of course, the norm as opposed to the exception. So when you're faced with that and you're trying and you're believing that strategic planning is going to make a difference for your organization, you're likely to run into, it seems like a lot of us are running into the challenge of what there are some resistors within the group, and certainly when the CEO is the resistor, that tends to be really problematic. So bringing to this forum, we're going to take a couple extra minutes on this particular topic. What can you specifically do? Well, I'm going to share a couple ideas. I'm going to pass it over to Nancy, but let's start with maybe the obvious point, which is I think it's important, and I'm going to assume that you're not on the executive team, and you're being tagged with driving the strategic planning initiative because somebody along the way decided that you needed to do this. So we tend to think we need to do strategic planning without doing a good discovery, and we don't often do, discovery when we're in the organization. So if you sort of take yourself outside and look at yourself maybe as an external resource for just a minute, maybe looking in, taking the balcony view and looking in, I think it'd be really helpful to ascertain truly, number one, is what are the outcomes that the organization is seeking by saying we need a strategic plan. And that's a pretty obvious point. So what are the outcomes? Why are we doing this? And not just because we're supposed to, because it's what you're supposed to do in business, but really why. And I think that would be an important point to start with the entire executive team, including the CEO. So that's one thing. The other thing that's kind of part of that is and I know this doesn't always feel right, but what's the burning platform? What is the reason that someone in the executive team, maybe it's the board, that is asking for a strategic plan? What's the burning platform? Is it because the growth is off the charts and you're having a really hard time organizing the team around the right direction? Is it because you're in a retrenchment mode and the economy is really causing you the problems that it is for a lot of organizations, and you need to really figure out what the right things are to focus on? What is it? So that's a second thing to think about. And I think a third thing to maybe think about, and then gets this kind of upfront stuff, is taking an idea from the change management book called Switch, is really making the case. So what difference is having a strategic plan really going to make for the organization, starting with the end in mind? So we're 12 months from now. This is a question I always ask. It's 12 months from now. What difference are we going to see in the organization based on having an active strategic, and let's call it a strategic management process. Let's just not call it a strategic plan. We call it a strategic plan that assumes that we have an end point. And the benefits from strategic planning do not come from having an end point. They come from having an active process. So 12 months from now, what's different in the organization? What do we want to see based on going through the development of a strategic plan and then the use of the thing? So those are a couple of upfront things to suss out and clearly identify and get consensus on as you're embarking on or trying to reduce the resistance in the commitment around strategic planning, so and let's call it strategic management. So those are a couple things. I have some more things to share, but I know Nancy from her experience has some items that she wanted to share as well. So Nancy?
Yeah, I'm thinking more about the first question about the CEO who is really resisting it, and I can feel that person, the person who asked the question, your frustration. And I see that the CEO is maybe very tactically driven, which is fine, and his projects are very, very important to the company, which, as most directors, they are. And he's focusing more on getting the projects done, and he's been very successful in doing that versus thinking more strategically and high level. So I think that maybe one suggestion that I would have is that for you possibly to get together with another person who actually has the ear of the CEO, and you can build a high-level plan, and then take the CEO's projects and actually align the projects underneath the high-level plan that you developed, and then show it to the CEO and maybe possibly prioritize the different projects, and then start actually implementing the high priority projects. And then show the CEO and work with him and show him how the strategic plan has exactly what he wants with the projects in mind, and then wrap around later on, months later, and actually start adding some more strategic things and show him how that the benefits of aligning the projects with the high-level plan can be beneficial, and show him how the results actually can be measured and the progress of the different projects. The other thing, too, is then you can wrap around and actually start building the plan out more. So you're taking it one step at a time, baby steps, and then actually getting the buy-in from the CEO. But getting the buy-in from the CEO is important. It's just figuring out how to actually do it. But once you prioritize those projects and evaluate the projects, then he can see how those projects are actually part of the strategic plan and the benefits of the strategic plan.
You know, I just following up on that, Nancy, a couple points to that. One of our rules in our practice actually is that we will not engage in an organization if we don't have the sponsorship of the CEO or the organizational leader. So it's a pretty strong stance to take, and I think as we're looking at our first question related to the CEO's engagement around the strategic planning process, maybe the question that, you might consider just not doing it. And of course, we believe in the benefits of strategic planning. We believe that strategic planning, if I can say it this morning, can make a difference in organizations. But it can't make a difference in organizations if the leadership isn't there. And sometimes the organizational readiness is just not there. So that's kind of a different idea and a different approach to take. So a couple other points, and again, we're taking a little more time with this, but it's a big topic. We mentioned that strategic planning and strategic management is a management tool. So one of the thoughts that I had is make sure to put it in its place. So what is it doing for us as an organization, as a management tool, really? So it's creating shared priorities. It's helping us align our resources to those priorities. Again, this sounds all sort of high level, but it's very true. And the concept of creating shared priorities with a group of individuals is not that simple. And the right priorities, given the environmental factors that are occurring, is that dose of reality about what we really can do as an organization. So, creating those shared priorities that are based in reality, and then aligning our resources, time and money, to accomplish those priorities. And that is this idea of coordinated action. How do we create coordinated action throughout an organization? So I had mentioned before this idea of making the case. This is something that we just did last week in an organization, and I thought this was a really powerful question and exercise. So the question sounds like this, is how many decisions do you think are made in your organization every day? And there's a I don't know whether it's a vetted statistic or not, but apparently we make about 3,000 decisions every hour. Now, those decisions include everything from should I have a drink of water or, to should I send an email, and they're not all business decisions, of course, but let's just go with it for a minute. So, fine. So 3,000 decisions every hour times the number of people in your organization times the number of hours in a day gets you to a lot of decisions in the organization. Maybe you take it to 1,000 business decisions, I don't know. But at any rate, it's a lot of decisions every day. And ultimately, when we're talking about making the case, we're saying, do we have a need to help those decisions more accurately go in the right direction, to guide those decisions in a more appropriate way throughout the thousands of employees, the hundreds of employees in your organization? If the answer to the question is yes, then we would say that strategic planning would have a benefit as an initiative in your organization. If the answer to that question is no, we're doing just fine now, then, again, maybe it's not the right time. So just a thought on that. The other thing I thought about, too, when you're trying to make a case to executives is think about doing a staff survey. And ask the organization, is there a need for more clarity around the strategic direction of the organization? Is there a need for more clarity around the short-term priorities? Do they feel like their work needs to be more informed based on where the organization is going? And you may find the staff feels super aligned and super having visibility into the strategic direction, and other people may decide, you may get survey data back that says, no, we're feeling great. So that's another way to go about it. Ask the quote-unquote customers. Ask the folks that the executive team is leading. So those are some very specific points that I thought would be helpful in these two instances. Nancy, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think that was great.
Okay.
You covered it.
Great.